I'm Got Late. This is Chapter 6. Students flee the paparazzi rush in. Saturday, November 3rd, 2007. On Saturday night, plainclothes policemen were seen in the student bars around the city interviewing anyone who may have seen Miss Kercher on Halloween night. BBC News. Investigators say the killer probably broke in through a window, locked Meredith's door after killing her, and then escaped in a hurry, leaving the front door open and throwing the phones into the woodlands as he fled. Sunday Mirror. The Italians dubbed the murder Mistero di Meredith, the Meredith Mystery. The entire country reeled from shock. How could such a beautiful young woman with no enemies die so brutally in Bel Paese? La Stampa captured the full horror. She would have been 22 years old on December 28th. Meredithkercher, who was from London, crossed the English Channel only to die in Perugia in an old house in an old town. Inventive reporters turned the murder into an action movie about two plainclothes police postal cops who uncovered the vicious murder of a British student while chasing down lost cell phones. No mention of Luca Altieri kicking down the door, the flatmates who came into the plot as mere stragglers, returning from a holiday weekend to hear the terrible news. Murder was rare in the hilltop town, which residents invariably described as tranquilla. When the local police did investigate the murder of a woman, they usually discovered that a husband or boyfriend had done the deed. In 2007, they had already jailed Roberto Spacchino in a sensational Barbara case, accusing him of killing his wife Barbara following a long period of domestic abuse, the details of which kept spilling over into the press. They hadn't solved the disappearance of Sonia Mara, an Italian student from University of Perugia who had vanished the November before Meredith's stabbing. Sonia had last been seen leaving her apartment with a man dressed in black, probably a lover. The Mara family did not even have a body to cry over, lamented her sister Anna, who was certain that Sonia had been murdered. As tragic as Sonia's disappearance was, however, it didn't sound like what residents feared the most, a random act. If they asked themselves, a killer broke into the cottage to rape or steal, what if Meredith's death was a work of a sex maniac? Then nobody was safe. The headlines on the bright metal newsstands along the Corso only fed the fear. Scusata studentessa in camera di letto. Female student's throat cut in bedroom. Studentessa ventenne era seminado in camera. I am so sorry. 20-year-old female student was half naked in her room. Somebody posted a macabre ad in Italian on the wall of the Stanarini, offering Meredith's room for rent for €220 a month, calling it large and airy with a spectacular view, and saying that an English girl, hopefully Erasmus, would call as soon as possible. The telephone number given was Meredith's date of death. Thumbing through Thomas Mann's Death in Venice was the closest to tragedy most exchange students in Italy ever came. Their time in Perugia typically had all the charm and realism of a summer fling. In fact, investigators had to work at lightning speed to question students who knew Meredith. The sound of suitcases being wheeled across the cobblestones reverberated through Perugia. Robin Butterworth left on November 3rd, 2007, the day after Meredith's body was found. Soon did Amy Frost. Not only did they feel the need to be around their families, but they were terrified that somebody was targeting English girls. Over the next few days, most of Meredith's friends left the Umbria capital, needing to put some of the English Channel between themselves and the murder. Robin and Amy eventually completed their year abroad, but in Bergamo, another medieval college town about 200 miles away from the crime scene. They never came back to Perugia, Merlin's co-owner Piasco Alassi said. Though the girls did eventually come back for court, it was so stressful for them, the reporters, everything. No tranquility, they said. Indeed, some of them didn't even pack all of their possessions, they just fled. Sophie Purton stayed put, but her parents flew in to stay with her. The BBC's Christian Fraser reported that the police had refused her permission to leave the country because she had been the last person to see the victim alive. Like Raphael and Amanda, she was a person informed of the facts. The police needed her cooperation. Amanda certainly felt frightened, as she told friends, but she wasn't ready to leave Perugia. This could happen anywhere, she said at the Questera. Now she eagerly awaited the arrival of her mother, Edna, on November 6th. They planned to stay together in a hotel until they found new lodgings for Amanda. Edna also wanted to help her daughter restock wardrobe, since Amanda literally only had the clothes on her back. Meanwhile, Filomena was staying at her boyfriend Marco's place. Laura with a friend named Marizo Pace, just a temporary arrangement. Amanda hoped to live with them again, but they hadn't had time to discuss it. Local merchants worried about the economic fallout if students continued to leave. The mayor, Rento Rocci, insisted that the police would resolve the case quickly, telling La Repubblica that he felt no need to spur on the police since they were fully committed. Perugani could expect the perpetrator to be identified early and punished in an exemplary manner. Police Chief Arturo Del Felice, the commander of the entire Perugia police force, outranked even Profazio, said he knew the locals wanted the crime solved in a flash. The silver-haired commander, dark circles under his eyes, announced that all the investigative tools, strengths, and skills had been put into place to arrive at an early solution. The lights of the Questera blazed non-stop. Investigators coordinated by Giuliano Mangione, in his dual role as prosecutor and investigator, were trying to reconstruct the last hours of Meredith's life. They grabbed names off her Facebook pages, looked through her phone records, and questioned her friends. They knew Meredith had last been seen at 9 p.m. on November 1st, heading home on foot. Had she met someone? Had she spent her few remaining hours? How had she spent her few remaining hours? They called in Piasco and the other bartenders to pick out the faces behind the Halloween masks. They also studied the CCTV footage from the parking garage, hoping to spot Meredith coming home on the night of her death or her killer approaching the home. On November 3rd, Marco Cinciera, second in command of the flying squadron and head of an organized crime division, announced a massive manhunt. "We have 100 officers on the ground," he boasted. He and Monica, head of the homicide unit, coordinated the mass effort along with Domenico Giacino Provazio, head of the flying squad, and Edgardo Giobbi from the SCO, the Rome-based serious crime unit. Investigators searched the cottage grounds for a murder weapon, saying that it could be a knife, a screwdriver, or even a shard of glass. The forensic police, similar to the CSI, worked around the clock, photographing and bagging the evidence to be shipped off to Rome for analysis. Their finds included footprints, handprints, blood samples, and even the feces from the larger bathroom. Detectives found themselves in both lucky and unlucky circumstances to pinpoint when the victim was last seen alive. They knew Sophie had parted from Meredith around 9 p.m. on November 1st, but beyond that, their best weapon would have been taking Meredith's temperature, and that's where their bad luck began. The coroner hadn't arrived until early afternoon on November 2nd, and the forensic police hadn't allowed him to take the temperature reading until their own tasks were completed around 12:50 a.m. on November 3rd. More than 12 hours after Meredith's body was found, and presumably more than 24 hours after her death. By that time, the rice was cooked, to use the expression that Dr. Henry Lee once coined to describe the botched evidence collecting in the scandalous O.J. Simpson case. Meanwhile, reporters from all over the world swarmed the cottage. They mounted cameras on the narrow sidewalk of Viale San Angelo, where locals tied bouquets to long-stemmed roses to the rails. Sight seekers perched on the sidewalk and leaned over the railings, trying to get a view of the house's backside where Amanda and Meredith had lived side by side. That's where the two rich girls lived, some Italian onlookers would say of the remodeled back of the house, equating foreignness with plentiful cash. Later, the wealthy absentee owner of the cottage would complain that she owed the most famous house in Italy, and yet cannot collect any rent. For more than a year and a half, the once bustling cottage would remain cordoned off as a crime scene. The press also ransacked Meredith's Facebook page before anyone thought to lock it. Reporters grabbed the photos of her dressed as a vampire and flashed them on the screen in the newspapers around the globe. The shot of Meredith in the Count Dracula cape clowning around with a guy in a scream mask popped up all over the internet. By the far and best plunder of England's notorious Daily Mail, Nick Pisa's story, police hunt killer after British student is found butchered and part naked in Italy, came with 4 photos swiped from Facebook, including one of a smiling Meredith posing against the bricks of La Tana del Orso with the caption reading, "Bubbly but devoted to her studies." A trench-coated whirling dervish of a reporter, Pisa turned in a copy for many different publications. He found the victim's Facebook photos before police had released even her name. He gleefully explained his technique to Dublin Institute of Technology graduate student Michelangelo Felicetti for a paper called Crime in the Media, the sensational case and the murder of meredithkercher. Piazza explained to Felicetti that he had learned that the murderer's girl's name was Meredith, and then searched the web for a class list, finally finding the University of Perugia. There was only one Meredith from England, and now that he had the name, he checked out Facebook and was thrilled to find so much information available, including photos of her, snapshots, and names of her friends, and more. Soon he and many other reporters would shine the same flashlight on Amanda and Raphael. Italy's La Repubblica also featured the bittersweet photo of Meredith at La Tana. The 21-year-old Erasmus scholar beamed with joy, is seen in a stylish gray dress. Her faux leather brown purse left on the bed at the crime scene can be seen perched on a wooden chair. On November 3rd, Cicciera of the flying squad said that the police were hoping that the Halloween photos would lead them to Meredith's killer, perhaps a man she'd met that night. They suspected that she had consensual sex because they'd found her half naked atop a pillow on the floor, and except for the tiny defense wounds on her hands, they detected no signs of a projected struggle. Officers hoped Coroner Lusa Lally, who'd scheduled an autopsy for the next day, would be able to clear up the sexual assault issue. Meredith's British family found all of this speculation insulting. They were fairly certain that she hadn't phoned or texted anybody that last afternoon at Amy's and Robin's. She'd also borrowed a history book to study that night. And before Meredith and Sophie parted ways, they had agreed that they were tired and looking forward to a good night's sleep. Moreover, Meredith hadn't been dressed for a romantic encounter, but in athletic wear and minimal makeup, nor had she set up a romantic scene at the cottage, lighting candles and laying out wine glasses. The British girls had no man other than Giacomo and had ever entered. The British girls said no man other than Giacomo had ever entered Meredith's bedroom. Filomena, one of the Italian's flatmates, went further, portraying the British girl as a sexless student, all study and no romance. She called Meredith's relationship with Giacomo a sentimental attachment. Meredith's confident Merlin co-worker Piasco Alessi also offered a Giacomo-free view of Meredith's world. She was nice, cordial, but very reserved, and she did not have a boyfriend, he told La Repubblica. She was happy to be here, and she liked Perugia a lot. Her only worry was her Italian, which she still didn't know very well. He said Meredith always went out with the girls, and always in groups. She was not the type who'd meet a man in the bar and invite him into her bed. She was very proper and was careful about what she did. Although Chinchilla said investigators suspected that the man had committed the murder, he stressed the fact that they were considering all possibilities. We are now questioning all of Meredith's friends, male and female. Police questioned Giacomo thoroughly, of course. He considered his 200 miles away alibi cast iron, but he had lawyered up just like Filomena and Laura. Soon police would draw a circle around Meredith's social set and tighten it like a noose. By this time, the Meredith-Kercher mystery had drawn Frank Savarzo back to Perugia from Florence. He noticed the cute little house on Via del Pergola many times and thought the location was dangerous because of an out-of-control car could have spun right into its windows. He was also fascinated by the people caught up in the plot. He called his blog Perugia Shock because the murder had stunned the town. He thought locals would feed him tips and photographs, but they did not. They hated the media circus and wished the reporters would all go home. They already had their share of worries. In fact, the Umbria capital was struggling with the explosive mixture of recent immigrants, university students, and locals. Police were also battling a rise in stabbing, prostitution, and drug dealing. Meredith's murder only added to the general feeling of uneasiness about the safety of Perugia's streets. We'll tell girls who are studying in Perugia not to walk home by themselves, but this really shocked us, Esteban Pascal, the Peruvian co-owner of La Tana del Orso, told reporters. One of the few above-ground bars in town, La Tana, claimed to have Perugia's best wine selection. The arched ceilings and brick accents give it a cheerful feel of the Napa Valley wine tasting room. It also had small tables on the street spread with bright yellow tablecloths where one could enjoy rich lasagna while watching happy-looking students stroll up and down the cobblestone Via Elysee. For Amanda and Meredith, that winding street had provided the quickest route up from the cottage into the historic center, a steep climb through the Etruscan arch. Esteban described Meredith as a regular customer with dark good looks. A really nice, smiling girl coming here for live music and drinking with her English friends, he told the Independent. For Esteban and his English wife, Lucy Rigby, The day before and after Meredith's murder were bizarre. Lucy, a striking young woman with soft blue eyes and upswept blonde hair, had suffered a violent attack on Latana on October 30th, just days before the stabbing. At closing time, a dark Albanian had picked a fight with another man near the door. The drunk had grabbed a large ceramic vase and flung it at the other man, who ducked. The vase hit Lucy instead and gashed her forehead, and she'd ended up in the hospital. Earlier that night, Meredith had been in Latana with Raffaele and Amanda and a couple of British girls. Lucy, originally from Shrewsbury, England, remembered the customers because they were such a strange grouping. The small, quiet American girl, drably dressed, accompanied by her much taller, plain-looking Italian boyfriend, and the British girls in their pretty clothes talking amongst themselves. Lucy was surprised by the British girls' aloofness. They could hear my accents. They knew I was British, but they had no interest in me. After a while, I didn't try to engage with them. During the 2 hours that this group shared a table, they said little and drank less. Only a liter of White House wine. When the check came around, they pooled their money, paying entirely in coins, and then they separated ways. Because Lucy worked behind the scenes in the kitchen area most of the time, she wasn't sure who the girls were. After they left, she complained to Esteban about the 2-liter, 2-hour unfriendly table. Her husband told her not to worry. The English girls were good customers. Meredith often waved at him as she headed home to the cottage. She and her friends loved to dance, Esteban said, and they often came to Latana to get tickets to local discos that he, like other bartenders in Perugia, dispersed. These prize tickets provide free entries to the big discos on the outskirts of town, reached by special bus on Saturday nights. Those girls can stay here as long as they like, Esteban told his wife. I know them, the regulars. British reporters trooped into Latana right after the murder to do 2 stories in one. They wrote about violence in a beautiful town, about a drunk who'd attacked a British bar owner in his own establishment, and about a British girl who had lost her life shortly afterwards. Like other bartenders, Esteban gave a flurry of interviews after Meredith's homicide with mixed results. Like many of the locals, he disliked the way the reporters described Perugia. The British press had dubbed the rocky hill town the New Ibiza, after the leafy tropical Spanish island known in the UK for drug-fueled fun in the sun, while even the Italian Repubblica insisted that a world of studies, parties, drugs, drinks, sex, pubs, and discos awaited visitors in Perugia. Now I know where I want to go for spring break, an online commenter wrote on the National Public Radio site in the U.S. Locals also coped with urban legends. A rumor went around that the Perugia bartenders had concocted a cocktail called the Bloody Mez, modeled after a Bloody Mary, supposedly the victim's favorite drink. Her friends, on the other hand, said that Meredith preferred a stylish mojito, a delectable mix of lime juice and tequila spiked with rum and other ingredients. The Bloody Mez rumor disgusted Esteban. The police came to see me. They know us. We have a good relation. They say, we know you wouldn't do this terrible thing, but people are upset and we have to ask. Do you have this drink? He rolled his eyes. Of course I tell them I would never do anything like that. In South London, TV reporters posed in front of the pale, semi-detached Kercher house for their broadcast. The dark wood accents and wood-paned windows, the house stood on a spacious street in Colston, an upscale neighborhood in Surrey. John Kercher lived in a red brick apartment in Cordon, a short drive away. Behind closed curtains, the family mourned, said the BBC reporter in front of the house, as she delivered her short report. A well-dressed man and woman were visible speeding by her, keeping their heads down. She identified them as friends and relatives who had come to help the family cope with the loss. John Kercher could be seen opening and closing the doors. Reading the next day papers couldn't have helped the family cope with the grief. Police hunt killer after British student is found butchered and part naked in Italy, said the Daily Mail. The best known of the racy tabloids, it had been schizophrenic habit of salting useful information into the hyperbole, so it couldn't simply be ignored. A lean, factual article on the Kercher case might appear one day, an overblown, nearly fictional account the next. The Mail also excelled in hard-to-obtain crime scene photos and paid-for exclusives, a reflection of its deep pockets. All of the London newspapers quickly became obsessed with the Kercher stabbing, from tabloids like Sunday Mirror and The Sun to broadsheets like The Times and The Independent, The Guardian, and The Daily Telegraph. Energized Fleet Street reporters found Perugia the perfect launchpad for astonishing coverage. Not only did Italy's police, stations, and lawyers often leak like broken-down yachts, but the country was offshore of British laws that crimped pre-trial publicity. The Kercher case also satisfied the newspaper's appetite for the next big thing. Since May 2007, tabloid journalists had chased the sensational Madeleine McCann missing toddler case. An exquisite little blonde girl with huge, unforgettable blue eyes, Madeleine had vanished from a luxury resort in Portugal where her glamorous-looking parents were vacationing. Unscrupulous British reporters felt free to float rumors, believing that their country's libel laws didn't apply offshore in Portugal. The steamy Daily Express and Daily Star even alleged that the McCann parents were involved with their daughter's disappearance. Later, the lawyers would force the tabloids to print front-page apologies and to pay out demands to the parents, whose lives had been made a living hell. The internet increased the tabloid damage dramatically, since the stories that had once been read only in the United Kingdom now spread around the world. Conspiracy theorists on message boards lapped up every detail. Now the rumor was that the most vicious tabloid reporters had descended on Colston and were trying to dig up information on the victim's sex life. In Meredith Murdered by Scary Movie Nut, the Daily Star claimed that a film called Scary Movie inspired the British girls murdered. The spoof film, which featured 6 students being murdered by a serial killer in a scream mask, was one of the 21-year-old's favorites, the story began. Some of her pals dressed up as film characters for a Halloween fancy dress bash less than 48 hours before she was killed. Typically, the Daily Star relied on anonymous sources described as insiders, who conveniently backed up the story. Last night, detectives were probing the possibility the exchange student killers was a movie copycat sourced close to the investigation. It's a terrifying theory. It would mean others' lives may be at risk. The killer in the film did not stop at just one. Tributes to Meredith. What's happening? Tributes to Meredith also came rolling in, even in the tabloids. When the London Evening Standard's tacky, half-naked story appeared online, it attached a poignant comment from Meredith's aunt, Sarah Jennings. She noted that Arlene suffered from renal failure and needed to go on the kidney machine regularly. Hence the cell phone Meredith always carried with her in the back pocket. It turned out the British student had nearly canceled her year abroad over a worry about her mother, but Arlene had insisted that her daughter follow her dream. Mez was my niece, a young, thoughtful person, kind to everyone, especially her friends and family, wrote the aunt, adding that whoever did this has wrecked several lives as all loved her. She did not deserve this, as she is a quiet, shy person who, despite the pictures, was reserved and loved life. She will be missed by me and my family and all her relatives. The Guardian offered a glimpse of Meredith's by then locked Facebook. The picture Meredith had chosen to use on the website showed her smiling into the camera, dressed in a shiny red top and leaning into her friend Neota Sadler, whose own Facebook page simply said she was lost without her. Residents of London, where stabbing deaths were common, nevertheless expressed astonishment that such a vicious crime could occur in an Italian hilltop town. Former Erasmus scholars also weighed in, saying they couldn't believe Perugia had become so dangerous. Leeds University sent representatives to Perugia to help students cope. We will remember Meredith as a beautiful, clever, and happy young woman who was serious about her studies and popular with her peers, a spokesperson said. Meanwhile, DJ over in China was concerned about Amanda, as she had missed their Skype appointment at 4 p.m. on November 2nd. He knew Amanda wouldn't forget the appointment. He decided to check her Facebook page and saw a startling message she had left for all of her friends. My roommate has been murdered. DJ didn't know how to cope. When you hear terrible news like that, you'd think you'd be stunned into silence, but instead you can't quit talking about it. You can't think of anything else, he said, sympathizing with Amanda's talkativeness the first night in the Questera. I went to a birthday party that night and I could not shut up. Finally, I removed myself so that I wouldn't depress the hell out of everyone else. Meanwhile, Rudy Gaudet was keeping a low profile. A friend spoke to him on November 2nd, so he was definitely in Perugia that day that Meredith's body had been discovered. He couldn't have missed the firestorm over her death. Not only did he live just 10-minute stroll away from the cottage, but he would have seen it on the TV cameras, the reporters swarming the town center, and the students clustered on the street corners reeling from the news. But that night, Rudy once again headed to Domus. When the disc jockey asked for a moment of silence to honor Meredith, Rudy kept dancing. Meredith's friend Pietro Campagliano said that the extroverted man was dancing alone. People kept their distance from him because he smelled like he hadn't washed. Now, on November 3rd, Rudy Gaudet came up at the Questera for the first time. Stefano, one of the boys who had lived downstairs in the apartment, mentioned him on the witness report. Stefano was a serious-looking young man who spoke slowly but had a fine memory. He told investigators about the 2 times Rudy had been over to the cottage. One guy came to our house, was tall, skinny, and he always wore basketball shoes and baggy trousers. He was nicknamed Body Roga, Stefano said. The nickname was apparently a reference to Dejan Bodiroja, a Serbian basketball star. Rudy also went by the Baron. The police asked Stefano what size shoes Rudy wore, but he didn't know. They were looking for shoes to fit the bloody Nike print on the bed. To fit the bloody Nike print by the bed. As if he sensed a storm brewing, Rudy told his friends that same day that he was heading to Milan. They weren't surprised because he liked to go to the fashion capital for dancing and to visit his aunt in nearby Lecco. Rudy was unhappy in Perugia, according to his friends, feeling depressed, drinking more often. He was also having girl troubles and maybe needed to get away to sort things out. Rudy liked Nordic girls, one friend said, and they did not reciprocate his passion. To make matters worse, Rudy's landlord was looking for him. She asked him to present a letter of employment because she was worried he wouldn't be able to pay his rent. Since he'd been jobless since late August, Rudy had no way of providing such a document. On November 3rd, he split the town, skipping out on the rent. He threw a few things into a backpack and caught a northbound train. That night, he showed up at the Soul to Soul disco in Milan, which offered everything from hip-hop to reggae music. There, Rudy met a young woman named Veronica Volta, and he told her that he was going to Germany to look for work. Perhaps he had a good reason for not lingering in Milan. 6 days before Meredith's murder, police had arrested him there after he was discovered sleeping in a child's nursery school, armed with an 11-inch knife lifted from the facility's kitchen. He said he had broken in only because he needed a place to sleep, and he wanted the knife for self-protection. When the police searched him, they discovered that he was also carrying a stolen cell phone, a laptop computer, both of which he had swiped out of the lawyer's office in Perugia. The burglar had broken through the second-story window. Rudy claimed that he had purchased the items from somebody at the Milan train center. However, after the police took mug shots, they let him go. He stayed in Milan only one day and then headed for Germany. He just wanted to be somewhere other than Perugia, said his lawyer, Nicodema Gentili. Rudy wore Nikes, so did Raphael. Detectives led by prosecutor Giuliani Mangione were already speculating that the murder was an inside job, beginning with the fact that they believed that the broken window had been staged. The problem was that, short of a confession, this would always remain a theory. The postal police hadn't been the first responders, not the postal police had been the first responders, not the Carbonari. They weren't trained to handle violent crime. By the time the Carbonari arrived, a herd of young people had tromped through the house, sans head coverings and protective booties over their shoes. The postal police had even asked Philomena and Amanda to go into their rooms and rummage around to see if anything was missing. Philomena had disrupted the broken glass in her room twice. In Umbria, where gyms were as rare as Vietnamese restaurants, investigators doubted that anyone could climb 20 feet up a brick wall and enter through the house through Philomena's window, or that a burglar could throw an 8.8-pound rock through a window in the first place. In fact, investigators described the window as if it were the Chambu Icefall of Mount Everest. They glossed over the open shutters visible in the early newspaper photos, not to mention the grilled window directly near Philomena's, which beckoned to mischief makers as a handy little ladder. Later, private investigators would wonder if the parapet right next to the front door might not have offered a perfect launch pad if one wanted to throw a rock big enough to break a window. The ravine below the house, where the prowlers had been spotted on 2 occasions, often offered plenty of similar stones. Nevertheless, police never wavered from their contention that the window had been broken from the inside to fake a burglary. Once they decided the break-in had been staged, they only saw 2 possibilities. Either Meredith had let in a trusted person into the house, or somebody she trusted had used a key to get in. At 11 a.m. on November 3rd, Raffaele and Amanda showed up at the Questera as the police had requested. But detectives told Raffaele they didn't need him. Instead, they drove Amanda back to the cottage. In most of the press photos taken that day, Amanda looked pale and upset, wearing a black fleece jacket over the same blue top and white skirt she'd worn the previous day. Her hair, parted down the middle, appeared more brown than blonde. She was biting her nails in one shot. In another, she took near the steps of the cottage, looking small but serene in her white skirt, talking to Prosecutor Mangione. In the most widely circulated photo, Amanda Knox pressed her hands together, a gesture her friend said she made when upset. All around her were male officers in plain clothes, 7 in all. One officer had his hand raised to his forehead, pushing his hair back as if in anguish. That day, cops quizzed Amanda not only about the boys downstairs, the neighbors, but also about Meredith's sex life, an experience she found weird and unsettling, as she wrote in the long email she sent to her friends and family. At the house, they asked me very personal questions about Meredith's life and also about personalities of our neighbors. How well did I know them? Pretty well. We were friends. Was Meredith sexually active? Yeah, she borrowed a few condoms. Does she use Vaseline for her lips? What kind of person is Stefano? Nice guy. Has a really pretty girlfriend. Very interesting. We'd like to show you something. Tell us if this is out of normal. The police insisted that Amanda go downstairs with them. The day before, Perugia homicide cop Lorena Zagarni, a blonde with a prison matron build, had kicked down the door to the boys' ground level apartment. There, police had found blood spots in several different places, even on the light switches, which turned out to be from the cat bleeding from its ear. They also had photographed Guacamo's marijuana plants as green and sturdy as corn stalks, which he kept in a room with a special lock. In an email, Amanda said that the rooms were tidy because the boys had thoroughly cleaned them before leaving on vacation. Though Stefano's room had been stripped of linens, which Amanda found odd, his comforter had been shoved on top of his bed. She saw drops of blood on it. So she told the police, yes, the blood was abnormal. Also, she said Stefano made his bed. Under prodding, she said Meredith and Guacamo had been seeing each other a few weeks. Meredith never mentioned any fights, and anyway, Guacamo was a calm person. The couple seldom appeared in public. Meredith liked to go with her British friends, while Guacamo was more of a homebody. Sometimes Meredith went to his room, other times he came to hers. Yes, Meredith said she had fun on Halloween, but she hadn't mentioned anybody new. She never went out at night alone, only with roommates, Guacamo, or her English friends. None of the girls had given their boyfriends keys to the house. That night, Raffaele took Amanda strolling around the center, not realizing that they were being watched. Yet police were posting surveillance cameras everywhere in Perugia, trying to cut down on drug dealing and street violence. All over Italy, in fact, the cameras were on. 2 years later, La Nazaline would call Perugia a city increasingly similar to a bug room in a reality show, Big Brother, with cameras rolling and electric eyes ready to spy on every plaza and alleyway in the heart of town. At 7 p.m. on the evening of November 3rd, Amanda and Raphael went to buy some underwear for her at a boutique in the center called Bubble. She was still unable to retrieve her things from the cottage, and her mother hadn't yet arrived with more clothing. She was more likely tired of wearing the same underpants. Raphael accompanied Amanda into Bubble, where he was badly outnumbered by teenage Italian girls in trendy clothes, chattering away while loud music thumped through the store. CCTV cameras, clearly visible in the entryway, protected clothes from shoplifters. The cameras caught the lovebirds in the second room, smiling, touching, and staring into each other's eyes. At one point, Raffaele gave Amanda a quick kiss. She sorted through the schoolgirl t-shirts, tank tops, and lingerie. She was still wearing her black fleece jacket and white skirt and carrying her usual patterned shoulder bag. After the lovers grabbed a pizza and then headed over to the Perugia flat of Maurizio Pace, the young man with whom Laura was staying, Filomena was also there with her boyfriend Marco. We talked a little and listened a little, trying to see how we were, because clearly we were all a little in shock, Laura said. She had trouble following Amanda, though, because she broke into rapid English when she got upset, and Laura couldn't keep up. She found the 20-year-old that night both annoyed and annoying. Amanda kept complaining that she felt tired and she had not had a break since Meredith's body had been found. She was sick of the place, the repetitive questions, the need to discuss the scene at the cottage, the nasty assertions about Meredith's sex life. What is it with the Vaseline anyways? Laura didn't know. This was the first time about hearing anything about the Vaseline. Amanda continued to rant about the police, saying that they were becoming more belligerent, shouting even. She was tired of the pressure. Laura became increasingly exasperated and wished Amanda would just stop talking. One could wish. In an email, Amanda gave her own version of the events. It was a hurricane of emotions and stress, but we needed it anyway. What we have been discussing is basically what to do next. We are trying to keep our heads on straight. First things, though, my roommates both work for lawyers, and they are going to try to send a request through on Monday to retrieve important documents of ours that are still in the house. Secondly, we are going to talk to the agency and move out. It kind of sucks that we have to pay next month's rent, but the owner has protection within the contract. Unbeknownst to Amanda, the police had called Sophie Purton into the Questera for the second time that night. She was about to offer them a voice from the grave. Sophie faced the A squad of investigators, including Domenico Profazio, head of the flying squadron, Edgardo Giobbi from the Rome-based Serious Crime Squad, Monica Napoleoni, chief of the Homicide Squad, and Rita Ficara from the Narcotics Squad. They kept Sophie there until 11:10 p.m. They began grilling the 21-year-old lead student about Meredith's social set. Profazio said that he was determined at that time to gather as much information as possible about the victims and persons who lived with her in the floor below. We tried to reconstruct her movements and that of her friends until the time of death. Most of all, he wanted to name every single man who had ever come across Meredith's threshold. The British girls went out together 4 or 5 times a week to movies, dinners, and pubs, Sophie began. They always watched out for one another and made sure everyone got home safely. She was sure that Meredith had only Giacomo in her life. She would have told her friends if they met someone new. They didn't have any secrets. They were just young girls, far from home, happy in Perugia before all of this started. Sophie began to hedge, though, when asked about hashish, the most popular intoxicant. She said that if Meredith smoked it, then she must have been with her roommates or other friends, and that she hadn't confided in Sophie. As for Amanda, perhaps she smoked the stuff. Sophie wouldn't know, though apparently Amy Frost said that she might. And yes, Sophie had smoked marijuana herself, but not in the city of chocolates and jazz. Very well, the officer said. Now tell us about Hitchman Korari. He was the 28-year-old Tunisian man the English girls knew from the clubs. They called him Shaky because the way he shook when he danced. Once at Domo, Shaky had dropped his trousers in front of Meredith to show off his underpants. It was his idea of a joke. Sophie doubted that Meredith had ever opened the door to Shaky, but she couldn't rule it out. Not by coincidence, police had already questioned Heichman. He described seeing the British girls at the gigantic Gardanza, a 7-bar disco club outside of Perugia at 4 a.m. on October 14th. That night, Sophie had been very drunk and had vomited in the bathrooms. Meredith and Robin were hard-pressed to get her home. They'd come on the Saturday night bus and faced a 25-minute ride back. It was Saturday, and I was with a friend called Abdel. Hakam told the investigators. I could see that all the stuff from Maryland was inside and lots of foreign women students. There was a bus of them every Saturday as we were leaving the car park at the end of the evening. We met Meredith and Sophie. Sophie was drunk with another woman I don't know. Meredith asked me if we could take them home, given the state that Sophie was in. Since the girls had known Heichman for some time, they weren't worried about riding in his spacious car. His friend Abdel did the driving. On the way home, Meredith asked Shaky in Italian why he was at the club. He said he had 3 jobs. He worked as a chef at the Gardazia and in 2 clothing stores in Perugia. Heichman tried to hug and kiss me on several occasions, Sophie said rather sweetly, when the officers pressed her about the unusual young man. But I always refused until last Wednesday. He did kiss me. Very well, said the investigators. Now let's talk about Halloween. Sophie said that she, Robin, Amy, and Meredith had partied together all night. Meredith had fun, but Sophie never saw her with any particular man. When detectives asked her about the 2 young Italian boys who had been at Merlin's but not in costumes, in a photo of Sophie's Facebook page where 2 olive-skinned boys were seen laughing and hugging Meredith. She was smiling, fake blood all around her mouth. Sophie said that she remembered the photo well. She'd taken it herself. Why? Because her friend Meredith had looked so happy at that moment. The Italian boys had been dancing next to her in a sea of ghosts, pirates, and witches. When the music stopped, they gave Meredith a squeeze and she had laughed. After Sophie took the picture, the boys departed. They didn't get any more hugs. The investigators then switched over to Piasco. The Merlin's barista had a reputation for being a ladies' man. Yes, Sophie knew him. They texted each other at least once a day. Meredith knew him too. Yes, of course, she had his cell phone number. Piasco was a good friend. The officers fell silent. Sophie took a deep breath and then turned the K-Lig light on Amandaknox, a girl she had met only once. I want to tell you some of the things Meredith said to me about Amanda, Sophie told the officers. I think they're important. Meredith told me that Amanda would sometimes bring men back to their house. I don't know how many men there were. Meredith mentioned one man in particular who works in an internet cafe. That's where she met him. Meredith thought the man was strange. At the time, she didn't give me any more details. I don't know how old he was. I can say that at least one other man was taken back to their house, although I don't know what nationality these people are. Sophie did add a qualifier, but it never made it into the press. I think for Amanda, Some of these men were only friends. Then the British girl took a wild, erroneous guess. As for the man that works in the internet cafe, they might have slept together. Sophie Purton was the first person to reveal that the murder house has always had a lot of visitors. Corriere della Sera would later declare, police officers then decided to interview Amanda Knox, the American student, the reporter added. Indeed, they would summon her to the station the very next morning. Amanda had never been a night owl, but the evening she couldn't sleep, even if Raffaelli's safe little flat on Garibaldi. So she decided to take action. She sat on her boyfriend's bed, fired up his computer, and tapped out a long email describing the events of the past few days. She wrapped it up at 3:30 a.m. Italian time and sent it to 25 people in her online address book. Perugia police would have it in their hands within 2 weeks because a former employer would hand it over to the Seattle police, who'd forwarded it to Italy. I had to let off steam somehow because the whole situation was so heavy that I couldn't sleep, Amanda said later. She was always scribbling down her thoughts as a way of understanding them. Her mother had stored hundreds of her diaries back home in Seattle. So I needed to write. I needed to let off steam by writing, especially for people who were worrying about me. Then I felt better. Amanda's keyboard skills had always been hellacious, her fingers unable to keep pace with her thoughts. But even for her, the email containing a startling number of typos, misspellings, and errors. Like Philomena, Amanda even got Meredith's age wrong. This email is for everyone, because I'd like to get it all out and not to have to repeat myself 100 times like I've been having to deal with the police station. Some of you already know some things, some of you know nothing. What I'm about to say, I can't say to journalists or newspapers, and I require that of anyone receiving this information as well. This is account of how I found my roommate murdered on the morning of Friday, November 2nd. The last time that I saw Meredith, 22, English, beautiful, funny, was when I came home from spending the night at a friend's house. It was on the day after Halloween, Thursday. Amanda traced the path of discovery, beginning with the last time she spoke to Meredith and ending with the fractious talk that she just had with Laura and Philomena, the Italian roommates. I've been talking an awful lot lately, and I'm pretty tired of it. I still need to figure out what I need to talk about and what I need to do to continue studying Perugia, because it's what I want to do. Anyways, that's the update. Feeling okay. Hope you are well, Amanda. Chapter 7, Too Many Men, the Italians say. Sunday, November 4, 2007. Less than 2 hours after Amanda listed male visitors, Stefano Bassani entered the police station. He was able to describe the one visitor as a lover of Amanda's. Sophie Purton's revelations had focused on one strange man, not a soccer squadron, but police summoned Amanda Knox to the station on Sunday to explain herself. In a 2:45 p.m. statement, Amanda readily listed the small number of male visitors that she had brought to the house. Only one of them was a lover, although police couldn't assume she'd slept with all. In Italy, bringing men home had an almost exclusively sexual connotation. Anytime Perugia police heard about the man coming over, they factored for sex into the crime scenario. Indeed, the victim hadn't been spared this speculation either. The most plausible hypothesis we have is that Meredith met someone at the Halloween party, Marco Chinchera, second in command of the flying squad, had told the Telegraph only the day before. She expressed a desire to meet him again. She had been to a friend's house on the night she was murdered, but then decided to take her own way home to meet him. Now all eyes were on Amanda Knox. Even though Sophie couldn't possibly know who Amanda slept with, investigators concluded erroneously that the American kept a busy bedroom, in addition to her week-long romance with Raffaele. She did not deny that there were visitors, Corriere said, when Sophie's statement was leaked, but the strange man Sophie was referring to turned out to be Javi, Amanda's co-worker at Le Chic. Meredith may very well have found Javi strange, but not a stranger. In fact, he was insulted when the police asked if he had ever had sex with Amanda, a friend. He said nothing more. "We sometimes dance salsa together, but I have a girlfriend and nothing ever happened," he told the English tabloid. The photo he posted of himself on Facebook showed a man with large features and a halo of curly, receding dark hair. Dressed in black leather jacket, he had his arm draped around a plainly clad girlfriend. He described himself as an admirer of Al Pacino, the musical group The Guardians, and the Palestinian cause. Ironically, Amanda and Meredith had discussed Javi on their last conversation because he didn't approve of Raphael. Meredith had told her roommate to ignore Javi and to follow her heart. "Javi's been to our house at least 5 times, Amanda said in her witness report. "The last time was October 31st. He knew Amanda because he met her at the bar with me. Javi never tried to hit on me. He's got this habit of hugging and touching even when he's not drunk." Later, Amanda explained in court that Javi came over to listen to her play guitar, since the only instrument she had access to belonged to Laura and couldn't be taken out of the house. The other men I brought back are one called Spiros, only once in October when he met with Meredith. Daniel from Rome, I don't know his phone number. He came over twice. The second time he said hello to Meredith and spoke to her. Spiros Getsios was Amanda's Greek pal from the internet point, a big black-haired local with warm manners and many friends. He hadn't seen Amanda since Halloween. After hearing about her roommate's murder, he had texted her twice. Later, he would return those messages over to the police, and they'd surface in the Messaggero offering a chart of Amanda's moods after the murder. Amanda, November 3rd, 9:57 a.m. "My roommate's been killed the night before last. I was the first to go home and call the police." Spiros, November 3rd, 11:28. "I know. I saw the latest news. I wanted to call you. It's really shocking. If you need a hug, tell me so, sweetie." Amanda, November 3rd, 11:30 a.m. "Maybe later, thanks. Today I still have to speak with the police for a while." Spiros, November 4th, 4:19 p.m. "What are you doing, sweetie? I hope you are well. If you need anything, call me. I am in the bar where you don't like having coffee." Amanda, November 4th, 6:19 p.m. "With the police at my house, I am very tired." "The list of people who visited the women is a long one," said Corriere, notwithstanding the actual shortness of the list. The newspaper noted that Stefano, one of the boys downstairs, had told the police that Amanda had sex with Daniel, a childhood friend of theirs from the Marché. That was enough for the police to summon Amanda back to the waiting room. Yes, she said she did bring Daniel home that one time, but that was before she met Raffaele. It turned out that Daniel was studying in Rome at the Università del Studio di Roma, in the fall of 2007, and he had stayed twice with the boys downstairs. The first time in September, he met all of the girls except Meredith, who had been away in London. On October 20th, Daniel returned to stay with the boys. They decided to go clubbing with Meredith, Amanda, Amy Frost, and a few other students. Stefano also invited his girlfriend. They all headed to Red Zone, a rowdy disco where college students partied amid throbbing neon palm trees under a revolving glitter ball. Daniel danced with Amanda, Guacamo, and Meredith. They had such fun, and they didn't get home until 5:30 a.m. Red Zone, that's the place where the girls became approachable, it seems. Maybe they needed some chemical help, wrote Frank of Perugia Shock. Guacamo kisses Meredith, and then Daniel kisses Amanda. When they come home, Meredith goes to sleep with Guacamo and Daniel with Amanda. When questioned, Amanda was perfectly willing to discuss Daniel, even though investigators treated this Ventura del Notte one-night stand as if sex were a gateway crime to murder. Search as they might, police would never find another male who had had sex in Amanda's bedroom, not even Raffaele, since she was always at his place. Nevertheless, they did not hesitate to paint her as well a whore. Amanda is not ashamed of having sex. Yeah, we know, said Madison Paxton, her UW friend. She's responsible about it and doesn't make a big deal about it. She's not obsessed with it. She's not into non-traditional things. She likes most things other 20-year-old Seattle female college students when it comes to sex. Madison said Amanda liked Raffaele because he wasn't like the other Italian boys she met. He was nice to her. He treated her with respect. He was kind. Alas, being open about sex was not an Italian trait even in the 21st century. Newcomers expecting to enter a Fellini movie soon discovered Italians were a passionate people, but the intricate sex schmores. Italy was not only a Catholic country, but also home to the Vatican, the epicenter of faith. Religion had a prominence in public life shocking to most Americans. Huge crucifixes hung in courtrooms. Children played in the schools. On the other hand, abortion was legal, divorce common. In Umbria, ads for married couples looking to swing with other couples appeared in local newspapers. Prostitution flourished in Perugia. Beautiful, hollow, cheat girls from Eastern Europe charged about $43 per transaction, worked grueling 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. schedules, and turned their earnings over to pimps. Transsexuals also made up part of that trade, according to Corriere dell'Umbria. Despite the stereotypes about large families, modern Italians married late and had one of Europe's lowest birth rates, usually one child per family. Many women engaged in premarital sex, though they frowned upon casual hookups, publicly at least. Since single women inevitably presented themselves as serially monogamous, hesitating to discuss sexual experiences casually over dinner with strangers or in public settings. You can do what you like, but nobody can know about it, said Judy Witz, an American writer who came to Italy when she was 30, married an Italian man, and put down roots in Tuscany. Italian women also resent the foreign women who come to Italy to have sex with Italian men. Local women have to guard their reputations. They can't just sleep around. For the foreigners, what happened in Italy stays in Italy. They don't have to worry about their reputations because they are not at home and nobody will ever know. In Perugia, a young man might stop a foreign woman on the Corso, address her in delightfully accented English, pretend to be a little shy, suggest a drink or espresso, and if all goes well, perhaps a special pasta dish in a restaurant in a restaurant where he perhaps knows the chef, all leading to her bedroom. Certainly, a seduction attempt of the Spanish Steps in Rome can be interesting cultural experience for female tourists, but it's not true that all foreign women lust after Italian men, said Amanda Castleman, an Italian American who first became an expat via UW's Rome program. She married a fellow alumni and returned to Europe for 8 years, including 2 in the Eternal City. That's a stereotype which some locals buy into. As a travel writer, I've talked to hundreds of expats and travelers in Italy. They complain that men can be very crude, especially on the streets. The creeps called pappagalli, parrots, often target women traveling alone. In their culture, the signals availability more than independence. So they hiss and bully and fondle, behavior that's 100% unacceptable normally. No wonder many travelers head home with complaints about another stereotype, Italian stallions. American women blogging about their Italian study abroad adventures described dancing in discos only in groups of other women, all of them watching out for one another. Fending off the Italian guys who pinched and grabbed, many said that they were scared to walk alone after dark, even in upscale neighborhoods in Florence and Rome. Zach Nowak, in the Little Blue Book, A How-To Guide to Perugia Life, wrote that Italian men are crude with foreign women because they believe the newcomers are looking for adventure, hoping to do things in Italy they wouldn't do at home for fear of retribution. Having decided that foreign women are easy, the local men abandon all subtlety. Abandon all subtlety. I know that word. What was that? No one doubted female Italian students led more cloistered lives than the foreign counterparts. Witt said that the Italian girls that saw trolling Corso, always in groups, probably had curfews at home as early as 11 p.m., dressed appropriately in bright-colored scarves, soft-woven sweaters, and tight jeans. They strove to act like the sort of girls whom an Italian boyfriend would bring home to his mother. If they had sex, it most likely was with boys from back home, their first loves, the boys they envisioned marrying. The sex was probably carried out in the back seat of cars for want of a better place. Many still lived with their parents. Even Italian boys must be discreet in the tiny Perugia where a night truly has 1,000 eyes. The Romeos of the Corso, chasing after foreign girls, probably had girlfriends back home whom they saw on holidays and to whom they would return once their college years were done. They weren't eager to advertise sexual liaisons, lest word trickle back to their hometowns. Once a male student got a reputation as a player, then he might have trouble attracting fresh partners in Perugia. Even the foreign girls would be wary. They would catch on and tell all of their friends. You can tell people everything, but you must leave half of it out, said one female University of Perugia student who lives near the Piazza. These Perugia people, they're not especially warm. No, they can be very cold. You can live by them for years, and they will not offer you even a glass of water. But if you are a young, unmarried woman, then you have to watch out. They will report everything you say and do. The woman used to invite a young man over to her flat, a friend just for lunch. A neighbor who'd barely nodded to her on the street waited until her brother came home, and then informed her that his unmarried sister was entertaining men in her home. My brother didn't care, but it was very embarrassing, she said. It was none of his business. Why should I have to explain anything to him? Other Italian women are quick to say their country is more modern than critics suggest. Italian women have men over to study with or do work with other things, said a female reporter based in Rome. It's perfect. It's perfectly okay. It's just that Meredith wasn't like that. Judy Witz noted that the cottage offered entertainment possibilities that many Italian accommodations do not, since it had a nice big kitchen living area where guests could be comfortable. For most foreigners, male and female, the street is only a place to socialize. Because sitting in coffee shops or bars is expensive, so is the passeggiata, the stroll along the corso, in the way to meet somebody new in any town. Amanda was no different than any of the other girls in the Perugia town, but her private notes and thoughts were exposed, out of context, I think, which makes anyone look bad. Ironically, perhaps, the United States is by far the world's most popular destination for foreign students, welcoming more than 600,000 per year. Americans, too, socialize by their own playbook. They do not like to be watched or judged. They enjoy having friends of both genders. They are out to meet as many new people as possible. Savvy university recruiters boast about the richness of their school's social life. The survival guide for foreigners at Emory University, a private school in Atlanta, Georgia, addresses the inevitable cultural shock, even needing to explain the behavior of American women to foreign students. Their relaxed and more independent attitude may be misunderstood by people whose native culture is more restrictive of women's activities. It is not unusual, for example, for unmarried women to live by themselves, to share a living space with other single women, or to go to public places unescorted. That Sunday, November 4th, Giacomo Slenzi was also summoned to the Questera, where he talked about his relationship with Meredith. Even though I really liked her, I didn't feel at all jealous about her. Me and my friends often use hashish and marijuana, but not other drugs. Meredith used hashish too, but we often took it together, either on our own or with other people in the house. Usually we got the drugs in the center of Perugia on the steps outside of the church in Piazza Novembre, but I don't know the names of the pushers. We'd go into town and get some anytime we wanted. I don't recall the women ever buying any. Usually us men bought the drugs, joints, alcohol as well. The women often come home drunk. Why would Giacomo describe his time with Meredith so joylessly? Perhaps he feared being taken for a jealous lover, the kind of person who might stab a girl in a murderous rage. His statement might also reflect Perugia's perplexing sexual code, as difficult for a foreigner to decipher as the Latin Mass. Merlin's co-owner, Piasco Alessi, offered some insight into Giacomo's boorish behavior. Meredith was definitely a nice girl, he said, and given his many years in serving drinks to college students, this was not guesswork. Girls often came into the bar with a certain look in their eyes, he explained, making it easy to tell what they were seeking. But Meredith wasn't like that. She didn't hand out her phone number and go home with strangers. Still, Giacomo would surely see her as a foreigner, somebody in town, only for a short time. Their relationship was not necessarily monogamous. They hadn't even reached a point of discussing love pasts. They shared a story, a common arrangement in Perugia, where young people are constantly arriving and departing at the train station, who wished to risk heartbreak over something that would end in tears and scenes at the ticket counter. Sure, Giacomo might sleep with a foreign girl. He might ask her to water his marijuana plants, but he wouldn't hold hands with her on the corso or call her his girlfriend, no matter how tenderly he might treat her in private. One day, Meredith is walking on the Corso with me. She is complaining about Giacomo, Piasco said. She says he ignores her whenever he sees her away from the house. And then, who do we see? Giacomo. Yes, he's coming towards us. You believe it? Piasco said. He does the very thing she says. He looks, he doesn't smile, he doesn't speak, nothing. When Meredith's image lit up the TV screens in London, it triggered the memory of the British journalist Francesca Steele. In the Times Online, she recalled hanging out with Piasco with other local luminaries like Patrick Lambada, Patrick Lumumba, then a DJ, on the church step during her own student days. She explained that the bar owners had befriended her, unlike the Italian girls whose company she'd sought. In fact, even her Italian roommate, Sylvia, couldn't afford to be seen with her in public. It's nothing personal, her roommate explained, but people would gossip. They would say Sylvia had a drinking problem and that I am like you, an English girl. Francesca, meanwhile, was rather in awe of the bar owners and their crews. By night, they were tending a bar, or rather, would be giving away drinks at one of the bars they ran, while the others would be entertaining girls. Always foreign girls, mind. Since, as my flatmate Sylvia explained it, an Italian girl wouldn't have touched them. Like many newcomers, Francesca found the bartenders delightful. Indeed, when Piasco took a liking to a girl, he would solve many problems for her. Need a place to stay? He knew somebody who was renting. Furniture moved? He'd send a crew right over. Feeling blue? Come hang out with us, he would say. Let's get espresso. Let's have a beer. When Francesca returned to Perugia the year after she left, she wandered along the Corso Venucci and saw Patrick and Piasco sitting on the steps of the Duomo, surrounded by a gaggle of giggling girls. It was laughably familiar, and the group seemed all more harmless for its predictability. As a friend remarked as she looked at pictures of Meredith out on the town with people we used to know, she looks just like we did, sociable, happy. Amanda's day at the Questera was far from over. Around 3 p.m., interpreter Aide Colantone came in to translate the American girl's latest statement in Italian. She found Amanda sprawled on a chair, leaning her head back. Colin thought she looked wrecked, pasty, done in. She spotted a small red mark on Amanda's neck, noticeably because of Amanda's pallor. The interpreter didn't think the mark was strange, although the police would jump to that conclusion. But she did worry about the girl's overall health. Como stai? She asked Amanda. How are you? Not well, Amanda said with typical frankness. I can't eat. I can't sleep. And my period just started. Colantone took the student downstairs, treated her to a cappuccino from a machine, and grabbed the coffee for herself. She offered Amanda a brooch, but the girl said no, thank you, and shook her head. What are you talking about? Amanda's starving. Nobody's fed Amanda. She can only eat vending machine food. Ugh. When they returned to the upper levels of the station, the seemingly friendly Colantone put the American girl into a bugged room. Raphael was, as usual, waiting around for his girlfriend, and he was allowed into the room too. Calentone listened to their conversation but heard nothing useful or suspicious. Finally, Raffaele left the room and asked the police if he could get a pizza for Amanda. They said fine. He called their favorite place only to discover that it didn't deliver. The lovers were desolate, the interpreter said to the report, because they were so hungry. There was only one solution. Raffaele would have to pick up the pizza somewhere and bring it back to the Questera. He left on his errand. Not long afterwards, around 4 p.m., Homicide Chief Monica Napoleoni informed Amanda that she needed to return to the cottage again. Laura and Philomena were also going with her. In fact, they soon joined Amanda in the bugged room. The microphone picked up on their comments. One of them came in saying that she hadn't felt well for days. The other asked Amanda how she was. "Not well," Amanda said, complaining that the police were treating me like a criminal. She then mumbled something about not lying. "Where's Raphael?" one of the roommates asked. "Out getting pizza," Amanda replied. The trio then talked about someone named Gregorio who had not entered their flat. Philomena stressed. Then Laura brought up her friend Maurizio, the boy that she had been staying with. She asked Amanda how the police had known about him. Amanda said she didn't know. Laura stressed that he had never entered the flat either. They had been interrupted by the police officers who came to drive them back to the House of Horrors. Colinet, the interpreter, came with Amanda, as did Monica Napoleoni. When they got there, the place was crawling with journalists drawn moth-like to the Kercher case. The reporters hung around on the narrow sidewalk across the street, hoping for a juicy quote or a sexy photograph. The girls hurried in, managing to avoid the throng. All of them found it painful to return to the house. Napoleoni escorted Amanda into the kitchen, insisting that she look through the knives in the cutlery drawer. "Do you see any of the knives missing?" the officer asked. No, the girl managed to say, meaning that the house had many knives and that she simply couldn't tell. She struggled to breathe, and she had an attack of the nerves, like she had experienced earlier in the day in the Questera, when interpreter had become concerned enough to take her downstairs for a cappuccino. Now Amanda collapsed on the couch and started to sob. During the inspection of the house, Amanda began to tremble, the interpreter said later. She was made to sit down. She was greatly upset. I remembered that she cried also. Homicide Chief Napoleano reportedly became concerned enough to ask the coroner, also in the cottage that day, to come see if the girl needed medication. Later, Amanda would say that she broke down at that point because of the full force of Meredith's death had suddenly hit her. She was also sickened by the questions that the police kept asking, especially, what kind of sex did Meredith like? The breakdown of this crisis of crying, she said later, adding that she felt very, very scared even to get near the home. All the emotions that I had kept inside me escaped because I'd had a shock and an inability to understand what really happened. I didn't want to accept it. And so, sometime before 7 p.m., Amanda arrived back at the station. Raphael was there to greet her, to no one's surprise. Investigators thought it was strange how the lovers always traveled in a pair. Police would invite Amanda and Raphael would show up. To detectives, the couples looked like co-conspirators. Touching, kissing, whispering, flirting. They thought that the girl had a stronger personality, complaining loudly of hunger, thirst, fatigue, and boredom. Police spoke of Amanda's virginal beauty. She looked glossy, like an American girl in a magazine. Investigators felt like a girl like that could persuade a malleable boy to satisfy her every whim. The rumor was that some lower-ranking officers had to be careful when encountering the American girl, lest they lose objectivity. Those huge blue eyes, that sweetness, fake or not. The couple didn't know it, but Edgardo was monitoring their behavior through his minions, especially words and facial expressions. Head of the Rome-based Serious Crime Squad, he noticed every little thing. As he later explained in a British documentary, he ran his investigators on pure psychologies, believing that detectives could establish guilt or innocence by closely observing the suspect's psychological and behavioral reactions during interrogations. We didn't need to rely on other kinds of investigations, as this method has enabled us to get the guilty parties in a very quick time. How investigators could apply psychological approach in a town like Perugia, with the huge language gaps and a rainbow of conflicting cultures, was the question. Certainly, Italian detectives had never met anyone like Amanda Knox before. With their West Coast fringe, flower child, honor student, soccer-playing, first-generation German personality, the more they tried to fit her into the Italian mode of behavior, the more perplexing they found her. But why had Giobbe suddenly so intensely interested in the turtle doves? As soon as they arrived in Rome, he noticed, as did everyone else, that the door wasn't forced open, and that he thought that the broken window was a staging, wrote Frank Sforza of Perugia Shock. He said that his attention was focused on the guys from the Marché because of the blood in the downstairs apartment. However, the Roman cop lost interest once the drops turned out to be from a cat with a cut ear. Investigators did travel to San Giorgio, of course, to check out their alibis, but they cleared all of them. Amanda and Raffaele's behavior was suspicious, always whispering to each other of all the things we know. Apart from kissing and whispering, Raffaele at the police station was, according to Giobbe, always classy. The only time Raffaele showed a little attitude was November 4th, when he insisted that he finally be allowed to deliver a pizza to Amanda, who evidently had nothing to eat all day. For Amanda, a different story, wrote Frank. Not exactly classy, not exactly controlled, not exactly sensitive. Homicide Inspector Monica was happy to show the lovers into a bugged room that night. No doubt she found them maddening. The phone taps had failed to reveal anything incriminating. When Amanda wasn't talking about being scared or tired, she was trying to score some pizza. She and Raffaele seemed to live on nothing else. At 7 p.m., interpreters strapped on their earphones yet again and translated for investigators. It was near impossible to penetrate their weird mix of Italian and English at first. They appeared to be discussing Javi, Amanda's buddy from La Chic, who had helped Amanda find a job. At another point, Amanda brought up Hyam, a.k.a. Shaky, the Tunisian who had knew the English girls. Amanda Knox, but in Italian. I know, but he's a bit crazy when she hesitates, stumbles in Italian, and continues in English. When he thinks about breaking off a relationship with a woman, incomprehensible, strange to me. He says he trusts his girlfriend, but he doesn't like it when he sees her talk to men he doesn't know. Even if they've been split up, incomprehensible. He looks at her and gets crazy, but then he's terrible. He says he doesn't mind seeing his girlfriend, even if he's talking to a man he doesn't know, but then he gets arrogant with me. Raffaele Solecito in English. This is ridiculous. Amanda Knox in English. I don't like him anymore, frankly. I mean, it's nice of him to find me a job, and I liked it when he played the guitar with Raffaele. Hang on. Are we talking about, he hesitates, your friend from Le Chic, or? Amanda interrupts him. Friend from Le Chic? I'm not talking about that. Amanda, who? I mean the one, aka Spiros? No, Shaky. Yeah, Shaky. I don't like him. He's not. I detest that man. He tried with me. Investigators also discovered that Raffaele told Amanda jokes to cheer her up, hence the giggling. First, he told her a funny story in stunted English about a prank he'd pulled when he was 15. Then he translated several vulgar expressions from Italian into English. Fuck you to your lousy ancestors. The lovers chuckled over that. Then Amanda turned somber, telling Raffaele that she'd been to the cottage, where the cops asked if there were any knives missing. Before she could say any more to Raffaele, her father, Kurt Knox, called her cell phone, and she filled him in on the house visit. She was at the Questera, Amanda told him. It was frustrating, she said, spending so much time there just waiting around. When Edna called, Amanda told her, too, about the house visit. She then handed off the phone to Raffaele, who told Edna that he had a photo of himself and Amanda, which he would send her. Amanda got back on the phone. She asked her mother to call her when she arrived in Italy, so she'd know about what time to wait for her at the Perugia train station. At one point, Amanda spoke a little German to an unidentified caller, most likely her second cousin Dorothy Kraft, a motherly woman who was very concerned about Amanda. She said it wasn't normal for the police to bring a witness back to the station that day. Amanda now shared her grievances with Dorothy, which were picked up on the wiretap. Even at Raffaele's, she said, she finds no rests. Read the reports. Calls come in from police, from journalists, she says. Asked her to remember who came to the house. They asked her about Meredith's sex life, and she says, What? I don't know. Then I don't know. Raphael got on the phone with his cousin. She evidently asked him to take care of Amanda. I can do nothing when we are in the Questera, he said. They are squeezing my brain, literally kicking me in the head. Amanda told her cousin that she had class on Monday. She thought the police might keep her in town for at least another month until December, which was okay. But she wanted to regain some semblance of a normal life. She hoped the police understood that she couldn't be at their disposal all the time. The bug session ended there. Coroner Luca had wrapped up Meredith's 7-hour autopsy around 5 p.m. Outside the building, he found reporters waiting for him in a darkened parking lot. Any signs of sexual activity? No comment. The tall, stooped-over Lolly smiled and fiddled with his car keys as reporters kept pressuring him. They knew he wasn't actually supposed to talk to the press. Finally, he hinted that yes, he'd found something that needed to be discussed with the prosecutor. Richard Owen, a tall, grayish-bearded British reporter who covered the murder for the Times of London, summed up the confusing day. Luca, the chief forensic science officer in the case, dampened down speculation in the Italian media that Miss Kercher had been raped. He said that only that there were possible signs of sexual activity and that the preliminary findings had produced interesting elements, but declined to elaborate further. Later, Lolly's findings would prove very interesting indeed. Like other Rome-based reporters, Owens was covering many other stories. He placed Meredith's murder within the larger context of Italian life, especially in the country's attempt to deal with foreign immigration from the North Africa and Eastern Europe, as he wrote for the Times. Fears rose yesterday that Miss Kercher's murder would fuel rising xenophobia in Italy. There is a widespread belief among local Italians that an assailant could have been an immigrant. The suspicions follow the murder the last week that the 47-year-old Italian woman was in Rome. A homeless Romanian immigrant from a makeshift camp is being held on suspicion of her murder. Their suspicions followed the murder last week of a 47-year-old Italian woman in Rome. A homeless Romanian immigrant from a makeshift camp is being held on suspicion of her murder. Meanwhile, prosecutor Mangione was taking a great interest in Amandaknox. Since he was in charge of the overall investigation, he heard about her every move. When he had first seen her on November 2nd, she reminded him of a girl next door. But that was before the kissing video. Her loud discussions with the English girls at the Questera and Meredith's complaint about Amanda bringing men over. Is the American girl telling us everything she knows? He was wondering. Could she have been involved? Is she covering up for somebody else? He had started to suspect a woman might be involved, Mangione said later, because the body was covered in act of compassion that he saw as uniquely female. But according to John Douglas, who worked for 45 years as a criminal profiler in the FBI's elite investigative supportive unit, covering the victim is typically done of a young murderer, not specifically a female one. In Douglas's seminal book, Mindhunter, he tells detectives who find a covered body to look for a young male suspect, since men commit most murders who hadn't crossed the line before. An immature person could still feel remorse and wish to cover up his terrible work. A burglar may break into a house only to rob, but if he finds a woman alone, he may launch a sexual attack. If the woman screams, the burglar may run away or kill the victim in a panic. His behavior isn't predictable. On November 4th, a Republican reporter leaked a very big story. Autopsy. Meredith raped, perhaps by two, boldly claiming that Meredith struggled with the killer or killers who would compel her to have sex. The reporter noted that he wrote this story after he saw the coroner meet with the prosecutor and investigator at the cottage on November 4th, where they discussed the autopsy's interesting developments. When pressed, however, Lally would always say that he could not confirm either a rape or multiple assailants. La Repubblica reporter could not know it, but he was witnessing the birth of Mangione's Giaco erotica sex game theory of the crime act. All that awaited was the casting of characters, including the criminal mastermind. The reporter watched both Lally and Mangione poke around that day, a visit that made me think of a turning point, because with them was a young woman, it seems, one of the friends of the victim. Who could that girl be but Amanda, making her first appearance in the press? Alrighty, see you later.